Witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie. Nazywam się Dominika.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dominika Wielowiejska, and it is my honor to be your host today. Welcome to this room. I would like to welcome also those who follow us on the channels of the European Commission and elsewhere on the internet. A handful of housekeeping remarks. We have two parts. The first part is the Train of Memory. On the 27th of January is the International Day of Holocaust Memorial. On this day, the authorities of Tuscany organized the Train of Memory. This few-day-long travel from Florence to Auschwitz is an opportunity for more than 700 Italians to talk, mentioning important subjects like European heritage and everything that is connected to the Second World War and civil responsibility. During their stay in Poland, an important moment is the visit to the German Nazi death and concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. It's also a unique opportunity to listen to the testimonies of Italians and Poles who were saved from the Holocaust. This project has been now run for the 15th time, and that's the first part of the meeting. The second is the civic dialogue. These have continued in the countries of EU since 2015. Members of the European Commission visit cities throughout Europe and speak with citizens about the problems and future of Europe, listening to what citizens have to say. In Poland, a very good news, we are a record holder here because it's already the 136th dialogue of 1,300 that have been organized in this term of the European Commission. Please let me share with you some technicalities. At your disposal, there are those headsets which let you listen to the interpreters. Channel 1 Polish, Channel 2 English, and Channel 3 is Italian.
1. Polish translation, channel number 2. English translation, and channel number 3. Italian translation. Chcę Państwu powiedzieć, że
I'd like to tell you, as I mentioned before, that we are followed on the channels of the European Commission and elsewhere. On the internet, we're present on Twitter and Facebook, #EU Dialogue. Please switch off or set into silent mode all your mobiles. Sorry, but this is always a thing worth remembering. Now, let's welcome our magnificent guest, the first Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans. The Rector of the Jagiellonian University, Professor Wojciech Nowak. Deputy Mayor of the Municipality of Krakow, Bogusław Kośmider. The President of the Region of Tuscany, Enrico Rossi. So glad to hear such a warm applause. The Director of the representation of EU in Poland, Ambassador Marek Prawda. We have with us also Professor of Contemporary History, Professor Giovanni Gozzini, who is the Italian moderator of our part, the part that pertains to the Train of Memory. May I also welcome representatives of the European Parliament, ambassadors and consuls, but especially warm, I'd like to welcome Sisters Andrea and Tatiana Bucci and Lidia Maksimowicz from Poland, who are survivors of the Holocaust. They are the ones who will deliver their testimonies in the first part. But before that, may I invite to the stage rector of the Jagiellonian University, Professor Nowak. The floor is yours.
Dzień dobry Państwu.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, welcome most cordially, all of you. Please don't let me mention once again all the names and functions, as Dominka Wielowiejska has welcomed us all. May I welcome you with all my heart to the Jagiellonian University. Here to Krakow and the Jagiellonian University, the mayor is certain to approve, is a certain unity. The Jagiellonian is the oldest university in this country and one of the oldest in Europe. For 655 years, it has been fully active in education and, as I always emphasize, in bringing up, even when Poland was wiped away from the map of Europe, and when we had no full sovereignty, the university was there. It persisted and it fulfilled its mission. We're proud of our graduates. Please let me remind you of Nicholas Copernicus, Karol Wojtyła, much better known as John Paul II, Pope, and for literary reasons, Wisława Szymborska, the poet. Yet in the university, like in Poland, in this city and in Europe, there have been hard times. Today you have visited, today you have discussed the tragedies of the Second World War, the Holocaust, the Shoah, the destruction. The university has also lived through such a time. In the second month of occupation, on the 6th November 1939, the German powers, authorities, ordered to arrest 183 professors of the university, who were then transported to the camp in Sachsenhausen, a day that the university always commemorates, not only for the sake of history, not only in respect for the people, most of whom died there, but for the young ones, so that we knew what chauvinism means, what lack of tolerance is, and what lack of understanding denotes, what totalitarianism really is. Ladies and gentlemen, here I'm addressing especially our young guests. You will have an opportunity to talk to people who participated in those dramatic events. You had an opportunity to visit Auschwitz-Birkenau, and I must say that what your members said, saying that having been there after this profound experience, after seeing Auschwitz-Birkenau, nothing will remain the same. This is a message to you, to the young generation. Never allow that lack of tolerance, nationalism, xenophobia, because they led to such depravity, because there is no other word than this that describes it. Thank you very much for taking up this effort. Your visit is no tourism. You were very well prepared, seminars, literature, discussing things together. Please remember about that throughout your adult life. If a university succeeds to share this with the young generation, this means that the university fulfills its mission. May I now wish you that this meeting remains long in your memory. Welcome to the Jagiellonian University.
A teraz głos zabierze...
And now it is time for Bogusław Kośmider, Deputy Mayor of the city of Kraków.
Panie Przewodniczący,
Mr. President, Your Magnificent Rector, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the beautiful city, the royal capital city of Krakow, the city of history and culture, the city where for centuries we have successfully respected one another. Poles, Lithuanians, Russians, Ukrainians, Jews, Armenians, all those nations in Krakow were living, they worked here, they supported one another. Welcome to the city of a magnificent university, the university whose presence in Krakow is a part of this style of mutual respect. Let me welcome you to the city that is called, as I've exchanged some comments here, the Florence of the North. Yes, we are a city very much like Florence, and I believe that we do plenty to keep up this link. I welcome you to the city that has very strongly and sorrowfully experienced the last events in Gdańsk. A word can kill, but it can also heal the situation, the contact. May this mutual exchange of experience be for all of you an experience of good, an experience that builds a perspective, an experience that creates the beauty of this world. Welcome to Krakow. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We're opening the first part of our meeting, and may I now pass the floor to my Italian counterpart, Professor Giovanni Guzzini.
Thank you, Dominica. Good morning. This morning, we discovered that the three stories we're gonna tell you today start from the same point. I mean, in Belarus. We didn't know it before. I found a small sign of what has been and what the Europe will be. A space, an area where national belongings cannot be wiped out, but they can be enriched through a cultural movement of identities. Our testimonies today will tell us how their lives had to get out of the evil. This evil that will never leave them, but has a particular meaning, a particular impact on young people. Our faith, our belief is that all what happened will be kept in our hearts. And if you agree with me, we can invite them onto the floor.
Professor, could we invite our guests? Professor, would you please invite our guests? Please join us.
Andrea
and Tatiana Bucci, Lidia Maksymowicz.
Ok, allora siamo...
We are ready to start off. Together with Andrea and Tatiana, our testimonies of this session, we do have another tale of what we have done yesterday. I'd like to give them the floor, and they will probably tell what they were not able to tell people yesterday. Good morning, everyone. Dzień dobry. The only two words I remember in Polish, unfortunately. Despite I came here to Poland many times, your language is very difficult. It's pretty hard to learn some words, maybe just because of my age. We are very honored to be here. We'd like to start off with our story. When we were arrested in Rijeka, where we were living, we were 6 and 4 years old. We are the youngest Italian survivors of the concentration camps. Some Germans, together with fascists, came to arrest us. We were first brought to the peripheries of Rijeka, and then we had to get through our rice Askling camp. After spending some nights there, we had to travel by a cattle car, and we got to Birkenau after 4 days. There were no trucks yet that could lead to the Birkenau camp. Trucks started to work in May, later on. Dziękuję. Good morning, everyone. So we got to Birkenau on the 4th of April 1944. It's unbelievable. For example, well, take into consideration all the numbers that make of this date. There was a huge mess after we went off the train and the first selection was made. Some of the people were brought into the lorries and into the coaches, and they were gazed immediately. And we were undressed. We were there been a disinfestation, and the women were cut their hair, and we were tattooed as well. You didn't have your name anymore, and you had to learn your number by heart. So my number was 7, 6, 4, 8, and 3. I don't remember, to be honest, if we were called by our number, but we didn't have a name there in the concentration camps. But yeah, of course, my sister, my cousin was with us, but I don't remember someone calling us by name or by number. We were trying to get used to these conditions. You know, children have a spirit of adaptation. We didn't cry. I don't remember crying or using the bathrooms, to be honest. We were in the barrack dedicated to children. There was a small group of children. There were not many children, but there were a few. As Andras said, we tried to get used to this life, and we realized that we were Jews. There were some blokover that told us that we were Jews. They were the only women we had to deal with, because most of the women were working into the camp. And then we tried to accept this life. You know, as a child, we tried to accept that. We tried to get into terms with this life. You know, we were a child and you were given this life, and, you know, children have a huge spirit of adaptation. And there is another thing I'd like to stress here. My mother tried to see us in the evening, and she kept saying to us our name and surname, otherwise we would have forgotten that. My name is Tatiana, but on the documents my name is Liliana. And my mother told me that, remember that, your name is Liliana Bucci. And she kept saying this because in this way I would never forget my name. 2 years later, when we were freed, when we had the chance to go back to Italy. And then there is another thing I'd like to stress out here. One of the Blokova that kept us, remember that one day you will stand in line and you will be asked to join your mother. Try to refuse this offer, this proposal. We did have and unfortunately for our cousin did not hear our suggestion, and when we standing in line, but Sergio, together with 18 children, instead of meeting the mother, they were deported to Neuengamme, close to Hamburg. They underwent some experiments. They suffered a lot, and when the American allies were about to enter the city, it was probably the 28th of April, they were brought to the school of Brullenhusen in the periphery of Hamburg. Before hanging them on Butcher's Oak, they were stunned. And Sergio was the only Italian who was in this group. And the story was discovered by a German journalist. And thanks to him, we have a sort of cemetery where we commemorate these 19 children.
Mi ricordo improvvisamente qualcosa cambia nel campo, ci sono altri colori nel senso che gli uomini che circolano per il campo hanno un'altra divisa e sono persone che ci sorridono e ci offrono anche cose da mangiare. Ricordo benissimo che c'era una jeep e sul cofano di questa macchina era seduto un soldato russo che aveva sulle ginocchia una tavoletta di legno e tagliava delle fette di salame per noi bambini, perché io ricordo intorno a questa jeep soltanto bambini, non persone adulte. Poi ci portano, c'è stato detto che ci siamo fermate ad Auschwitz ancora un po', poi perché ci hanno portato in ospedale, perché i russi ci hanno visitato, ci hanno dato le prime cure, ma questo non ricordo. Poi ci hanno portato vicino a Katowice e poi da Katowice siamo andate a Praga. A Praga c'era non siamo mai riusciti a trovare questo posto.
In Prague we could never find this place, and there was this kind of orphanage where definitely we had a better life than in Auschwitz, but there was no love there. And there we started attending school. We stayed in Prague for a year, and one day we were called and they asked, so who of you is Jewish? And 2 people took a step, 2 twins, a boy and 2 of us. These 3 children were with us both in Birkenau and for the whole year in Prague. But if truth be told, neither my sister nor I can remember them, and we only remember about them just raising their arms to answer the question. So we left with a military plane and we were taken to England, in Surrey, in a beautiful town named Linkfield, where a gathering center for Jewish children that survived the concentration camp was built. Both hidden and survivals, both hidden children and survivals from the concentration camps. And there we were born again. We were asked what happened, where we came from. We said we're from Italy, and we told our tale. And after a bit of English classes, we were sent to a public school, a beautiful one, whereas the school in Prague was a dark building where teachers were very strict. Because if you moved a bit, or if you didn't know the answer, or if your answer was a bit harsh, then you had to give them your hand, and they would use a stick, a wooden stick, to kind of beat you. And that was their way of teaching. But England was a totally different country, at least for us. And there we found our new family. And something really important happened there. One day the director of this place called us separately, and she showed me a picture. "Do you know them?" she asked. And I said, "Yes, they're my mom and dad." And then Andra confirmed, as she can say that, very fortunately, very luckily, Mom and Dad survived the war. They met again in Rijeka and then moved to Trieste. And they started right away looking for us. But since we said they were dead, it was hard to prove that. So Mother remembered about something very important. This picture was taken the day of their wedding, and when we were living in Rijeka, before our history began, Mother took this picture with her for us to give a goodnight kiss to our dad. And so we remembered perfectly about this picture, and that's how we managed to get back home after all bureaucratic documents and steps that needed to be taken care of in England. We remembered our name and surname, and we knew we were Italians. And that picture and all of these together, all these data, were very important for us to start living again together with our family. We also have to remind you that during our stay in Birkenau, we learned German, and that was the common language between us and the children. And in Prague, we were the only two Italians, and by that time we had forgotten our own native language, and we started speaking Czech. And then once we moved to England, we spoke English now. It is very important to be two. It was very important back then, and it's really important right now as well, because it makes it easier for us.
Grazie.
Thank you. Dziękuję. Thank you. Thank you very much. We arrived to Italy after a beautiful trip. We went through the Channel of England, and we started off from Victoria Station in England. I think I remember where I was, on the 5th of December 1946. And we arrived in Calais, and there we got on a beautiful train. And I remember that as it were the Orient Express, because we had a beautiful car, and the train stopped in many different stations, and every time we both got off, and we were very good at jumping the rope, and we used to do that until the train was not leaving again, so we had to get on. And eventually we arrived in Roma Tiburtina. There the train stopped and we got off. And at the very beginning of the platform, a car was waiting for us. And there stood our mother waiting for us. We could recognize her as our mother because she was back at being the mother of the pre-war times, and we were there together with a social assistant, and she delivered us somehow to our mother. She greeted us goodbye, and she left because she was going back to England. It was kind of a trauma for my sister and I, for us, because we definitely recognized our mother, but maybe we were afraid of starting off a new life, because our mother was in the station with the very small part of a Jewish community in Rome, and we were kind of overwhelmed by these people that showed us pictures of children, asking us if we had seen them, but they were all speaking Italian, and that was a language that for us by that time we had forgotten. And instead of crying because we had found our mother again, we cried because the social assistant was leaving. Later on we discovered that was real pain for our mother, but she was so good that she did not want anything more than we could give her at that time. So we were not obsessed with her feelings. She was really good. And after a short stay in Naples, because Sergio's mother, the sister of our mother, had gone back to Naples and she reunited with her husband, and they had a son, so we met our new cousin, and then we left for Trieste, while the London to Rome trip was a dream trip. The Rome to Trieste trip was terrible. We were in third class with wooden chairs that were not comfortable at all, and I remember we were tedious and we complained for the whole trip because it was really uncomfortable. The train was stopping very often, and in our car there was a very distinguished gentleman who gave us his pillow, because by then you could rent a pillow to be a bit more comfortable, and he gave us his pillow. We got to Trieste. That became our new city, our new home, because Rijeka after the war became Yugoslavia, and Rijeka today is in Croatia. For the first time, that was my first time when I met our father, because he left when I was around 10 months old, and by then I had become 7. So I was really curious about the physical aspect of my father, so I kept on asking mother during the whole trip, how will father be, how will he be? It was really funny. With our mother we spoke German, then with our father we started speaking English, and between the two of us we spoke Czech, which is the language we were speaking best at that time, and that was a language that no one could understand, so that was our secret language. We could say whatever we wanted and nobody would understand us. Thank you, Andra, thank you, Tatiana. You see, we have 2 European citizens ante litteram, because what is Europe? It's a pillow, it's a cushion, it's a solidarity network that is built after the tragedy, and that their trip throughout all Europe was a witness to. It's a Europe that takes you back home, but that opens you to the rest of the world. So I think that's a great message to deliver. Lidia is our Polish part this morning. She has a very similar yet very different history from the one you have just heard, but it's the same reason that takes her here, and now she will tell us about it.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Lidia Maksimowicz. I am one of the last living witnesses that can bear witness to that story, because it has been 74 years since this terrible thing. The youngest person that was staying there was a teenager. At this point, this man is an elderly person and cannot meet young people, such wonderful young people as I'm meeting today. So my story was somewhat different from what you heard just a moment ago. The only thing similar was this barrack where we were sitting on bunk beds and we never spoke to one another. We had to learn commands in a foreign language, in German. It was December 1943 that I arrived here, and I came here from Belarus. At the time, it was occupied by Germany. We, civilians, got arrested. We were suspected of cooperating with local partisans. So, at first we stayed in a prison, and then we loaded onto this cattle carriage, and we were taken away somewhere, we didn't know where, without any food, without any water, no hygiene to speak of. And there I was, together with my mum and my grandparents. When the train stopped, we were exhausted. And the doors opened, and there we saw something even more terrifying that we had experienced before. It was the ramp of Auschwitz-Birkenau, a concentration camp. At the time, we had no idea where we were. The air was ghastly, and it was leaving those smoking chimneys nearby. There was a row of SS officers, and they did this initial selection. Some of them had dogs on leashes, and they were trying to jerk away. They were barking at us. We were terrified. On top of that, it was dark by then. There were those spotlights right on the square, and we were divided. At the time, we did not really know what it was all about. Soon, however, we realized that it was something, well, suspect. Some people that looked tired or sick, not fit for work apparently, they were not considered the right working material, were directed to one side. And this is where my grandparents were directed, and they were taken to those smoking chimneys. My mum was young. She was 22 years old at the time, and with a larger group of mums with children, they looked relatively ripe and healthy, because we never arrived from the ghetto, mind you. So we were directed to the other side, which turned out to be the side of the living. And we were taken to a place where our mums had to completely undress. All their property was taken away, all the souvenirs. Then they were made to take a very short shower. Then they returned to us, children that were waiting for us, and we couldn't recognize them because their heads were shaven. And they got those striped uniforms that you saw at an exhibition in Auschwitz, and they got clogs, and then came tattooing. And this is something, a memory that I share with those ladies that spoke before. So the numbers were tattooed on our arms. Even the small children got tattooed. I was only 3 years old at the time, and I got tattooed as well. So I got this number, and I carry it on my arm till this very day. This is a brand, and every day it reminds you about this terrible time. So we got tattooed. The women were put into those uniforms or striped pajamas, and then children were taken away from the mothers. The children were crying, shouting. Mothers were doing the same thing. But there were those other women who were taking care of it. And later I learned that they were taken or brought there on purpose. They were criminals from Germany, immoral, so they would tear those children away from the mother's arms. So quite quickly those mothers would be chased towards the barracks. They would be bitten on the way. And us, the children, were also taken to one of the barracks. And there I saw many children on bunk beds. We were also made to enter there, and there was just some, just a bit of straw, and there were those blankets that you could cover yourselves with. And it was a dirty rag with insects, and they were quite nasty because they were crawling all over those bunk beds and all over the walls, and they got them more active at night. They wouldn't let us sleep. We, the children, had to adapt very fast, very quickly to those conditions. First, you had to learn commands in foreign language and the local lingo that was used to communicate there, because after all the children spoke different languages because they came from different corners of Europe. So I adapted very quickly. So it was all about mentality. We quickly turned into those little creatures, like little animals that fought for survival. And they approached us just the way they would adults. And we would also have just little bread and this terrible smelly soup with potato peelings. And at first I would find it difficult to get any soup at all. But then I get a pot because I learned to fight for survival. Many children died. So basically you would take those items from those that died, and we wouldn't react at all to the death that surrounded us. Now, the hygiene was a problem. There were no toilets. You couldn't clean yourself. You couldn't wash yourselves. So, twofold disease, what we suffered from, it was a kind of diarrhea that affected also the adults. There were no toilets, as I said. So basically our life was about chamber pots we were sat on, mind you. Nobody would take care of us, nobody would wash us. So the capo and the officer would make sure that everything was orderly, walking around with the whip. They wouldn't even touch us because they were basically too disgusted to touch us, those lousy little creatures. And Dr. Mengele was the head physician in this camp, and he conducted pseudo-medical experiments on women, children, and on twins, especially. It was mentioned by the ladies. I was quite a strong child, so I was fit to be experimented on. That is why I lived longer. So I observed other children, and I learned from them how to take cover and hide in a dark corner, but at times you wouldn't be successful, and they would take us to this laboratory. The laboratories were very close to the crematorium, and the central lab was in this main camp. This is where we were tested, we were injected with bacteria and vaccines, our blood would be taken, and there was this special fluid that was supposed to turn the color of our eyes to make us more Aryan in our appearance. And the doctor himself would pick those more fit children, and I was selected into this group. And then we would return to barracks, and we would life lace almost on those bunk beds. And yet the capo would still take us to the roll call square, despite our very, very bad condition. At times we would have to stand there for hours, even though it would be heat or very cold. So I did survive, and I survived because I was fit and healthy, and my mum was a young, strong woman. And she would be taken outside of the fence every single day. Dr. Mengele, let me say a few words about him. Everybody called him the angel of death. Well, his appearance was quite interesting. However, he had no human feelings whatsoever. He was obsessed with this Nazi ideology. He wanted to grow this special man that would dwell over Europe one day. So, every single day, my mum, a healthy woman, would be taken outside the fence to work very hard. They were supposed to move the course of the Vistula River. Mind you, they were working right behind the chambers and crematoria. At this point, these are just the foundations that remained. Harmenze was a village nearby. The local people knew that the camp was suffering from hunger because it was the most painful thing for us. And those people would leave some food, onions, apples, bread. And whenever my mom would get some food, she would crawl at dusk to give us some food, which is why I was stronger and healthier than other children. Many mothers would die in female camp. They suffered from typhoid, a terrible contagious disease that was the vector was lice. So this is how I survived till autumn 1944. It was then that huge transports of civilians arrived from Warsaw. There, an uprising broke out against the Germans, but then the uprising was defeated, and those huge transports of people arrived in Birkenau, including young girls, scouts. And we, little children, would be treated humanely by them. It was the first such human moment, the first human touch that we had experienced, because basically our discipline was a whip. We would not be given any toys. There was nothing to occupy us. Our lives was hanging somewhere between a bunk bed and a chamber pot, and the bunk bed there we were suffering from the orphan disease. So we would be simply sitting there, moving like that. There was no solidarity or friendship among us. It was only about the animal fight for survival. What I'm saying, I'm sure, is very sad indeed. However, this is what happened. And I still remember many things from that time, even though I was a small child. And by then, I had already experienced war. So by then, I knew that one must be silent, one must be invisible, one must not draw attention. So a time comes when people arrive in our barracks. They have different uniforms, those red stars on their hats, the liberators, the Soviet army soldiers. And I remembered this liberation because we got some bread with margarine. It was this new taste that I hadn't known by then, and some coffee. And people from Oświęcim, a nearby town, arrived. So those people would take the smallest children to their homes. And thus I found my way to a Polish home. A family took me in. And then I experienced a shock. For the first time I saw a regular room, a bed linen, and I could bathe. And I'm asking, are there going to be any rats or dogs? Is there the Dr. Mengele somewhere here? Is he going to come to get me? So it takes me a lot of time to get used to normal life. I'm suffering from anemia. However, as I said before, I was quite a healthy child. So after a few months, I can go outside to meet my peers. But this camp syndrome continues. I play out this camp experience. I'm playing the selection, and the adults are terrified. They say it's so easy to shape people into torturers and murderers. And for me, it was so obvious to see and experience death and pain. I was not empathetic. I was kind of ashamed of the fact that they managed to lock me in this place for so many years. And the number, I covered it with a plaster. I didn't want to go back to those memories. And yet something happened. I will tell you a few words about it. 17 years later, I met my biological mother. She had been taken to Belsen-Bergen, and this is where she got liberated by the Allies. And this is where she also met the Soviet officers, and they told her that you cannot go there to Auschwitz because the children are taken to Russia. And this is where my mom went to look for me. She looked in all these various orphanages, and I, on the other hand, thought that my mom died in Auschwitz. And I simply came to terms with all that, and I never looked for my mom because of that. Is it okay if I say something more? There'll be questions.
If I am not mistaken, we have 5 minutes for questions from students, right? Do we have questions? I think something was prepared. Please raise your arms if you have questions.
Chwilkę na pytanie do naszych gości. Czy
We have a moment for questions to our guests.
I'd like to ask the survivors, did you have a special thoughts, special feelings that you had in the concentration camp that helped to survive this experience? As far as we are concerned, the fact of being together helped us a lot. Sergio was alone. And the difficulties with that, and this is probably why he wanted to join our mother. We were together, we helped us, so probably we didn't realize many things. We understood them over time. To be honest, well, I could not understand the reality, to be honest. We were just children. Lidia? Lidia? Do you have an answer on that?
Tak, odpowiem.
Yes, I will answer because you're probably curious to know what my meeting with my mother was like. I was suggested by those young people to meet her. When I was 18, I turned to the Special Search Office in Hamburg, and after 3 years of correspondence, I learned that my mother was not dead as I believed she was, but I learned that she lived, and she lived in the Soviet Union at the time. Then the office in Hamburg got in touch with our office in Moscow, and that was a great moment because I was the first Soviet child returning to homeland, and it was a great success of those offices. Immediately I had a team coming to me, and they did a recording of my tale, the tale of, and that was really broadcast on the Russian and Polish national TVs. In nearly all European magazines you could see my photograph and a short bio. Then I was invited to this meeting with Mother, which took place in Moscow. Before I arrived, it was a train from Warsaw to the Belarusian station in Moscow. I received a special message, and thousands came because they wanted to see those happy people. The doors opened. I had a bouquet of roses for my mother, and I saw thousands of people who were crying their tears out, and they all hoped that if we managed to find each other, they might as well. That's why this was such a great event, propaganda-wise and political.
Thank you. We do have another question. A microphone, please.
Noi ci siamo chiesti.
We were asking ourselves, why does the remembrance of evil is not able to change direction? It's a pretty hard question, to be honest, so I think we'll take some time to give an answer. It's pretty hard to answer this question. I don't know, to be honest, why evil takes supremacy over many things. Why do we fear? Why are we afraid of the foreigner, of the diversity? We are all equal. We are all equal. The color of the skin, the religion, the culture may be different, but we are all equal. We are all equal. So I think we need to use our brain and not to be involved in what your friend or your family says. I think for young people it's very important to be part of a community, of a small community. You are scared of being alone. And remember that it's always better to be alone rather than being with bad friends.
I wanted to turn to you, the young people, like I do it in the Galicia Jewish Museum here in Krakow, the museum that invites young people from nearly all over the world. And then I use these words to turn to them. It's in your young hands that the future of this world lies. May you never allow that what used to happen here in Auschwitz-Birkenau happened once again, because it depends on you what this world is going to be.
Thank you, Dominika, thank you. Thank you, Lidia. Grazie. Thank you, Tatiana. I'd like to say one thing, something that I forgot yesterday, and I'd like to address my words to Italian students, maybe to Polish students as well. So I think we need to thank all the people that give you homework, they take care of your academic preparation. I think our teachers are the heroes of our time. They don't get proper salaries. Without them, our journey wouldn't be possible. So let's give them a round of applause.
Shocking. These testimonies have really been shocking. I believe that both you and I have been very deeply moved emotionally. Thank you very much for participation in our meeting in this first part of it. And thank you very much, Professor. We presently are proceeding to part 2 of our meeting today.
Bardzo dziękuję. Bardzo dziękuję. Proszę Państwa.
Ladies and gentlemen, in a brief moment we will start the second part, the dialogue. Let's reshuffle the stage, and in the meantime we will show you a short video about what citizens' dialogue looks like in other countries.
Nous devons nous occuper de l'Afrique, raison pour laquelle la Commission a lancé un plan d'investissement extérieur de 44 milliards pour combattre les raisons qui font que les Africains fuient leur continent.
You are the best educated, the healthiest, the best connected, the most international, most European generation in European history.
We cannot have legislation. Urgently.
More with the Secretary of State.
Siamo adesso insieme come
Nurture, tonight.
Et c'est cela qui a changé la façon de faire les choses. Pensez que nous
the European Union.
Working conditions, animal welfare, human rights.
À la Roumanie.
Jeszcze chwilka.
Just another moment for the resetting of the stage, and we'll start our citizens' dialogue in a moment. The rules that this plays along, please ask questions. If you have some reflections, please make them very short so that we have an opportunity for participation of as large number of people as possible, and I hope that our dialogue will work. May I invite the first Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans, to stage? And also the President of the region of Tuscany, Enrico Rossi. The first to address us is Mr. Rossi.
First and foremost, I would like to thank our hosts here, this prestigious university, and for their warm welcome and for inviting us to take account of the fact that relationships between Italy, Tuscany and Florence, as the Vice President of the city reminded us, are date back in time. They're linked to architecture and cultural men, architects. They came here, as they were called, from a prestigious university. So these are ancient links. I was also struck by the stories we heard today, by the attention that was paid by young people here. I was twice in camps together with our boys and girls. I traveled with them. It's an important experience that leaves a mark. And for us, this is a decisive investment on youth and on the building of a future. Maybe one of the best sentences I've heard is that the future is in your hand, in the hands of young people from Italy, Poland, from all over the world, in a world that grows smaller every day. And all these stories can build up your conscience and help you make right decisions in your life. And I think this is the greatest meaning of this wonderful morning. I would also like to thank Vice President Timmermans to be here, and I think his contribution to your education will be very, very important, because in my experience as president, I have had the chance to understand how Europe is important when it comes to sticking to values of tolerance, of solidarity and peace that are key to our future. Without this history, we would travel back, we would go back. We can change, but we cannot forget all positive things that we built. So thank you, and I would be happy to answer your questions. And I hope I can meet your needs and fulfill my task here. I would also like to thank teachers who receive low salaries. That's true in Italy, and this needs to change. But your work is very precious, and this is also another investment on the future.
Thank you very much. And may I now ask to the floor, Mr. President.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I could have listened to the testimonies for another hour and a half, but now we're on stage to answer your questions. I can only think about the bravery that was needed for 3 young children to survive the Holocaust. And as you, I visited Auschwitz and Auschwitz-Birkenau yesterday. And especially when you look at the scale of Auschwitz-Birkenau, but if you look at Auschwitz I, if you're in the exhibition, and I don't know what it did to you, but to me, seeing those endless heaps of little children's shoes, seeing this incredible mountain of human hair, what one asks oneself is, how on earth did Europe get to that point? And this is the question, this is the comment I have, or the subject perhaps we could discuss today. You have seen there what happens if we as human beings unleash our darkest angels upon other human beings. But what I think is important for you, for me, and for your teachers to talk about is, how on earth did we get there? Where did all of this start? How could you get to a point that you think it is normal to bring people and take them into ovens, and you take them into gas chambers and then burn them in ovens? The guards there had mothers and fathers. They were educated, and I am sure their mothers and fathers never told them you need to go and kill other human beings. So how did we, where does it start? Looking at German history, of course Hitler came to power by using hate as an instrument. But even by using hate as an instrument, in 1933, when he came to power, had he said in 1933, and now I'm going to deport all the Jews, the German population would not have supported him. Nobody would. So what he did is, in 1933, start a fundamental campaign of dehumanizing Jewish people, of taking away their humanity step by step, because they were accused of being enemies of the people, because they were not part of civilization, because they were part of an international conspiracy to weaken Germany, because they were creating diseases, because etc., etc., etc. And he started in 1933, and then after 5 years, he thought, let's see if I have succeeded. And then came the Kristallnacht. And then he knew, hey, I've succeeded. I have dehumanized them enough. When I start removing them from society, the German population will not rebel. At least not a majority of the German population. I think if we want to honor the 6 million people who were killed in an industrial way during the Second World War, if we want to honor their memory, if we want to make sure they will never be forgotten, we need to revisit the whole chain of events from the very start till the very end. Murder starts with words. Words have a meaning. Words can create an atmosphere. Words can create an attitude leading to hate, leading to exclusion of others. And my friends, I cannot be clearer than that. Look at our societies today, and hate is again a powerful tool in the hands of politicians. Words are used again to exclude. Words are used again to blame somebody else for your own failures. And whenever this happens in society, the first to experience that have always been in Europe and will always be the Jews. And then the Muslims, and then homosexuals, and then women. You always find somebody to isolate, to put in a different place. And if there is something that makes the European project unique, I would agree with Jorge Semprún, who said that Europe was born on the ashes of the concentration camps of the Nazis. That is where we learned that we need a different answer to hate and exclusion. That is when we learned that if we want to make a better world, we need to do it together as Europeans and judge people, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, judge people by the strength of their character, not the color of their skin. That is my appeal to you. You know that this is the first European election in May where people will vote who were born this millennium. You know what that means to people like myself? I was born in 1961, this millennium. Don't throw away your vote. Don't throw away your vote. Because throwing away your vote is like saying, I will give my credit card to somebody else. You don't make the decision who then uses your credit card, it's somebody else. If you don't use your vote, somebody else will decide about your future. Come on, you're independent young people. Decide for yourselves. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję panu przewodniczącemu. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, we're starting the dialogue, the citizens' dialogue. May I ask the first question, and immediately then the microphones go to you. In my case, this reflection is very lively. We have forgotten, or we do not appreciate what the EU gave us. It gives us a place for dialogue and cooperation. Thanks to this, we avoid wars in Europe, something extremely important. But sometimes I'm afraid that we underappreciate that. The more years have passed since the Second World War. But today, Mr. President, we must stand against a huge problem. And please excuse me moving to one of them, namely the problem that is connected to the disintegration of the Union, and I mean Brexit. Do you believe, Mr. President, that there is an opportunity for a beneficial, advantageous solution to that problem? Do you believe that the British will participate in European elections and Brexit will at least be postponed?
Answer like that, but I want to say a few things about Brexit. Of course, we all respect the sovereign decision of the British people. They have the right, it's written in the treaty, to leave the European Union if that is what they decide. And they decided in a referendum to do that. But this was one of my saddest moments in my life, in my political career, when this happened. And I want to say very clearly, I respect their decision. We will have to wait for what they decide in the House of Commons and the government. But were they to decide otherwise, and who in this room has never ever changed their minds on anything? It's also part of being human that you look at something again and you think, hey, perhaps not, perhaps different. Nothing wrong with that, but that's up to them to decide. But when and if they would decide that, I think every single one in this room would be happy because they belong to our family. The United Kingdom, in my view, still belongs to the European family. British citizens are just as much Europeans as you and I, and it would make me tremendously happy were they to reconsider. But it's not up to us, it's up to them.
Ale oczekują... Sorry,
yes.
Please.
But the British government expects that European Union yields and renegotiates.
We negotiated in good faith for a long time. We looked at the red lines Theresa May put on the table. We also had our own red lines, obviously, and I think the withdrawal agreement we reached is the optimal solution, taking into account the interests of both sides. And there are some things that cannot be done, and especially on the backstop. The 27 agreed that we will not abandon Ireland. We will support Ireland, and we will help Ireland achieve having no hard border on the island of Ireland. Because, you know, to make it perfectly clear, when in 1998 Tony Blair and the Irish government and the two main parties in Ireland reached the Good Friday Agreement, this was a historic change in Europe. The island had been in the hands of terrorists for so long, so much violence everywhere, that this Good Friday Agreement was a historic European document. But for the Good Friday Agreement to function, you need to avoid a hard border in Ireland between the North and the Republic. And if you reintroduce a hard border there, the risks of violence coming back are too big. And I think we have a collective European responsibility towards all citizens on the island of Ireland, whether they're British or Irish, to prevent violence coming back there, to prevent the troubles from the past coming back there. And that is why, for us, the backstop is a red line that we cannot negotiate with the British government.
Bardzo proszę o pytanie.
May I now have questions? Please, could you pass the microphone to the lady over here?
Will be to you, Vice President. But firstly, let me thank you from the bottom of my heart for your great effort and for your determination to support us for the defending rule of law and democracy in Poland. Thank you very, very much. My question will be building on what you said earlier about where this whole tragedy begins, which is with hate speech, with the dissemination of hate. Also, considering what happened recently here in Gdańsk, the tragedy in Gdańsk. My question is about what the Commission is planning to do. Are there any plans in terms of legislation in the upcoming term to somehow try to tackle this issue of hate speech, of disinformation, of fake news, and more importantly, as this Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari says, recently we can talk about somewhat brain hacking, human brain hacking by algorithms, and it's not only because of commercial purposes. It is now for political purposes, affecting elections, affecting the future of Europe. So my question is how the Commission is planning to tackle that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I will give you a precise answer on your questions. But let me start. Let me start by paying tribute to the political determination and the humanity of President Adamovich, who was a great European and a great Pole. And let me take some of the lessons he taught us. Pavel Adamovich, when he was attacked never hit back because he knows you cannot drive out hate with hate. Pavel Adamovich, when there were attacks on gay people, he didn't shout back, he organized a gay pride, which was a great success in Gdańsk. Pavel Adamovich, when there was a campaign to scare people about refugees, Pavel Adamovich got together with other mayors in Poland and said they are welcome in our cities. That is the way you address hate. You cannot drive hate out with hate. Only love drives out hate. Concretely, recently at a conference in Brussels we discussed about this issue, how do you deal with fake news, etc., etc. You know that those perpetrators of terrorist attacks in Europe, they were educated or brought to hate or brought to use violence very often on the internet. By people glorifying violence, by people telling lies about others, by people actually demonstrating how you make bombs, etc. So there is a threat there. And we need to act, and the Commission has come up with a number of proposals to act on these issues. So yes, we will continue to do that. But, frankly, I believe there is a more fundamental issue we need to address. Anne Applebaum, I'm sure you've heard of her, said recently, she compares the information revolution we're going through now to the coming of the printing press by Gutenberg. That had revolutionized the way people communicated in Europe, the printing press. Democratizing reading, etc. And this is actually a phenomenon of equal magnitude. Social media, the internet, artificial intelligence, all of that has the same paradigm shifting effect on our society. And you know that legislation is not going to be the only and even the most important answer to that. You know there's one thing that is most important, and that addresses all of you and especially your teachers. The only thing that will save us is this essential human capacity of critical thinking. If we continue to teach our children, if we continue to teach them the capacity of critical thinking, of not accepting anything that is thrown at them, but looking at it, questioning their parents, questioning their teachers, being taught by their parents to be critical, to chew on things. Because I think the biggest threat to humanity is the loss of the capacity of critical thinking, of groupthink, of almost tribal attitudes. It might not be true, but the tribe says it's right, so I'll stick to it. No. Our history tells us we are individuals who can make individual choices and who have individual rights. Don't fall into the trap of tribalism. Think for yourselves, draw your own conclusions, and stand up as proud young Europeans for your convictions and take others with you. That is the way we are going to solve this challenge.
Proszę o pytanie.
Can we have some more questions? Yes, please.
Taka prośba.
And a request, could you please also introduce yourselves and please be short in your questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Karol Mirek. I'm a political science student from this beautiful, outstanding university. And I have a question to Vice President. 3 days ago, you have written a tweet. Let me read it now. Sorry. So, to the young people standing behind me, you must come with us and shape your own future. And the question is, why we should follow you and follow people like you. You said European Union was founded on the ashes. Now those war ashes faded away. So amongst young people across the Europe, especially in the Central Europe, especially on the Southern Europe, there is a profound conviction that the European Union doesn't respond for our needs and for our expectation anymore. So now, please, convince me to follow and to support this obsolete model of European Union. Thank you.
So are you going to continue to complain about an obsolete model, or are you going to get energized, get organized and change it? I'm not saying you need to follow me. I'm saying you need to shape the future in your image, in the way you want it. I'm not saying you should do what I say. I'm just giving you an example. Take it or leave it. If you have a better idea, good for you. But what I don't accept is people complaining, putting something on Facebook. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm not saying you're doing that. Your task, sir, is to make me superfluous, because you will take the reins and shape the future. But as long as you don't do it, I will continue to act on the values I believe in. And you can disagree with me or agree with me, but take the responsibility in your hands. Because if you don't do it, somebody else will, and they might not be in Europe. They might be somewhere else. And why do I believe in the European Union? Now coming to the challenge. And you know, Guy, I like the fact that you challenged me. I wish more people would do it, so thank you very much for that. Why do I believe? Do you think, because the alternative that is presented to us is actually three things going around. One group saying we need to destroy Europe because it's not delivering. One group says we need to maintain Europe as it is. And then one group says, and I hope I can convince you that I'm part of that, we need Europe, but it needs to change quite drastically to deliver the results that we need for the future. But this incredibly bad thought-through idea that individual member states on their own would be better placed to face challenges like climate change, like the threat from Russia, like the unpredictability of the United States, like the rise of China. The idea that Europeans, we are only 7% of the world's population, all of us together. The idea that we could be better placed to serve our citizens as individual countries rather than as Europeans together is an idea I just don't understand. You know, for me, the European Union is not a goal in itself. For me, the European Union is a tool to build a society based on the values of our citizens. If in the future you or others find a better tool, kudos, great, and I will support it. But for now, it's still the best show in town. But we need to make sure that, for instance, the fact that so many young people, especially in Italy, still remain on the sidelines because they are not given an opportunity. I have too many Italian friends who tell me this all the time. The fact that coming out of the crisis, income differences in societies, almost all European societies, have hugely increased. Bankers are doing very, very well indeed again. But the people who paid to keep the banks in business did not get any returns yet. This needs to change very urgently. What also needs to change is we need a plan to bring Europe into a sustainable world. Sustainable world is going to happen. The only question is, who's going to shape it? Are we going to shape it, or is somebody else going to shape it? You know, I see the rise of nationalisms all across Europe, and I also see that too many young people are attracted by it. But I tell you one thing, they are very, very good at destroying things. I haven't ever seen them build anything. The only thing that their attitude leads to is paralysis. Paralysis. Look at those countries and societies where they are in charge. It's paralysis. They don't move forward. And please don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you what to do. The only thing I'm telling you is take your future in your hands, shape it in your image, be responsible for your and our future. I have 4 kids. I want them to live in a society where hate is not present, where people work together, where there's more solidarity than we see today. And I believe that if we see each other as human beings and not as part of a tribe, we will get there as Europeans. But sir, great that you want an alternative. I want an alternative as well, but I think there's more to be gained by reforming the European Union than destroying the European Union.
Bardzo proszę, następne pytanie.
Next question, please.
Pomeriggio a tutti, sono Alessandro Gazzetti.
Dove stai?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alessandro Gazzetti. I am President of Parliament for Tuscany Students. I would like to thank my region, my president, the European Commission for this dialogue opportunity that we were granted. And it's really important to start from today to build our future. We cannot start tomorrow to build the future of us young people. We have to be active and work for it. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Looking around me in this room, I see many Italian, Polish boys and girls sitting close to one another, and I see Europe here. Europe is here. We are Europe. This is Europe. That's Europe. We are Europe. And too often we hear that Europe is not something concrete, it's something higher that is detached from us and so far away. I don't agree with that. Europe is the most concrete thing that we can see, we can experience. I come from Livorno in Tuscany, and the luck of my town was that it was an open city, welcoming foreigners, and we moved, thanks to that, to town of fishermen, to a big city where different cultures, the Jewish culture, the Orthodox cultures, the Dutch culture, everyone, we have everything in Livorno. And without the welcoming of people, as in Gdańsk, as the Vice President of Gdańsk said earlier today, that's something beautiful. And I am going to ask President Rossi and you, so what can Tuscany do? What can Europe do to have this hospitality, welcoming spirit, to welcome other people, to live diversity as an advantage and not as a disadvantage? And what can we do as young boys and girls, because tomorrow's in our hands, and I hope that one day this might be the room of the European Commission, because the faces of people I'm seeing today are beautiful faces. So I ask you, what can you and what can we do so that Europe becomes something with a strong feeling and not something that's far away, and something to foster hospitality and the welcoming of foreigners? Thank you.
So let's see what in our region we can do. I don't know if you know, but in Tuscany, we are 400,000 migrants. 400,000 migrants in our region. But let's be honest, we do live in a multi-ethnic society. There are people with different cultures and backgrounds. More or less, And talking about Europe, there are 100,000 people coming from Romania. They work in different fields, and there are 100,000 from Albania. In 1987, 89, and after the 90s, and they are perfectly integrated. They are working in the green sector. And then we have non-EU migrants with whom maybe it's a bit harder to have a dialogue. So Europe is an help to integrate people. Non-EU immigration is made up of Chinese, Sub-Saharan people, Northern Africa, so I think we need to work all together to integrate them so that rights are granted, so that people are not left alone. The right to become Italian citizen is relevant to them. I think this is where we need to take into consideration. You attend schools with people who were grown up with you. Because of the fact they have a different color of skin, they don't have a right to be Italian citizenship, to be an Italian citizen. This is discrimination. So this is the first example that comes now to my mind. And then, of course, we need to be proactive in the field of tolerance and dialogue. There are many negative things which are happening in our daily lives. This is what I've read in Pisa. 2 young people, and they threw a detergent to a black guy. How do you call that? Detergent? Yeah, powder detergent, something like that. Bleach, yeah. This is not racism. Some people say this is not racism. This is not true. This is racism. I think we need to fight against racism. We need to build up a culture when this situation arises. We should be ready to act. I've been to Auschwitz as well. Everybody has a thought. Everybody has some feelings about Auschwitz. I got an information from the Polish survivor. I got something that really cheered me up. The first question I asked myself was, how could guards and all people who were living there not know about that? How could you bear with that? How could you bear with this evil? I mean, chimney, people were brought outside the camps to work. I think we need to act in order not to be in the same situation. We cannot be indifferent. I'm sure that the Vice President knows more about that. We cannot tolerate the fact that people die. We have a duty to help people who are dying. Otherwise, we turn a blind eye to that. We do not even give a small piece of bread to people suffering. This is what comes to my mind. We cannot turn a blind eye to that. Dante, you know very well, the Italian writer, in the third chant there are the indifferents, those who do not stand by anyone. Those who do not deserve to go to hell or to heaven. Those who are roaming around and didn't take any decision, they didn't take any position on that. And this is what I heard from Vice President Timmermans. We cannot turn a blind eye. Remember that. What can we do? I've been working in Italy with refugees. 3 years ago, while I was going to Sicily, I always asked the same question. How to help these poor people? Nobody in Sicily told me, send them home. Nobody in Sicily told me, send them home. What I've seen in Italy is a great sense of being left alone by Europe. This is what I heard, I felt while I was in Italy. We did everything at the Commission to help Italian people with funds, with initiatives and so on. There was a huge lack of solidarity at the European level among member states. And this is something I have to say in Poland. Let's be clear on that. When a European citizen understands the need of sharing solidarity with Italy and Greece, who do not share the same geographical position, otherwise, if we do not share this view with other countries, Italian people will feel left alone. Italy was very pro-European, and now he became a bit Eurosceptic, and we are attacked by the Italian government on an everyday basis. And the same thing applies on the other way around. When Poles say, we do have historical knowledge about Russia, we know the threats coming from the east. Poles have a right to solidarity from all European countries. And this is the basis, the fundamental. The problems of your neighbors are also your problems. Otherwise, we are all left alone and we are not able to solve problems.
Bardzo proszę.
Could we have the next question, please?
Hello?
Where?
Well, here. Here? Mr. President?
Where?
It's here.
Yeah. Sorry.
Hello. Thank you for the floor. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Barbara Łabęcka, and I'm the Young European Ambassador in Poland. So I'm briefly representing Polish youth in European Union. Dear Mr. President, in December you said that the elections of this year, of 2019, are not an ordinary elections, and also that we have to write a new social contract with European citizens. So may I kindly ask you to explain to us why do we need it and how would it look like? Thank you.
I believe if you look at the political forces in all of our member states and you look at the rise of anti-European movements that are becoming stronger, why are voters going to those anti-European nationalist movements? Because they share the ideology, perhaps a part, But I think also because they are disillusioned. Disillusioned by the European Union, disillusioned by the traditional parties who have not delivered what they had hoped for. And if I call this election an election about the soul of Europe, I say this because the choice before us is going to be quite clear. Do we believe that we can improve the lives of our citizens if every member state goes into a fighting mode towards the other member states? Do we believe in a Europe where we fight to get things done? Or do we still believe in a Europe where we share a destiny and we then also have to share solidarity? And then I come to the second, and I strongly believe in the second. Let me be very clear about that. But solidarity is not mere altruism. Solidarity also has an element of self-interest in it. I take care of somebody else who's in trouble, and I count on that person also helping me when I'm in trouble. That's the basic element in our families, in society, in how we relate to others. And this feeling in Europe was lost. The feeling was lost. Ordinary citizens were told we have to put billions and billions of taxpayers' money into saving banks because otherwise the economic system would suffer. And citizens did. Reluctantly, but they did. The banks recovered quite well and are doing extremely well, and the citizens are asking themselves, so I did this, and what is in this for me? Look at salaries, they have not, the salaries do not reflect the growth in our economies. Insecurity that has come to the labor market. You know, you get a job, but the job is extremely insecure. You know, in my own country at some point, but the judges corrected it. That's why you need independent judges, but that's another discussion. What we had in my country was that a 16-year-old boy riding a bike with a Deliveroo rucksack on his back was considered an entrepreneur. How ridiculous is that? And if he fell and he was ill, he didn't get any compensation, no medical costs, etc. So if I say we need to rewrite the social contract, we need to create a Europe that actually protects its citizens. And it is so necessary because the world is changing at lightning speed. And as I said before, we are only 7% of the world's population. And we are only strong if we stick together. We're only strong if we understand what the Polish citizens want and respect that and work on that, and at the same time understand what the Italian citizens want and bring these two things together. They're not exactly the same things, but we can create a balance. And if the idea is lost that you find progress in compromise, and that you can only find progress in zero-sum games, because that is what many politicians are now saying. I win, so you need to lose. What is wrong with both of us winning a bit and compromising on something? If that idea is lost, the noble art of compromising, then we will not bring Europe forward, and it will be every man, every woman on their own. And the final comment I want to make on the social contract is very important. In my view, very important. Do with it what you like. But what I see in these sort of neo-traditionalist or neo-nationalist movements is they also want to restore. They want to take us back 50 years. And they especially also want to put women in the same place women were 50 years ago. And I say to all women and all men, because feminism should also be a man's cause, I say to all women and all men in this room, be extremely careful. Don't let our mothers, our sisters, our daughters be put in a weaker position with a reference to tradition or family values. No, we will not allow this to happen.
Bardzo proszę, następne pytanie.
Next question, please. Can we have the next question, please?
Good afternoon. I'm a student, and wanted to report what is being said in Italy, in my territory, about the European Union, because by reading things on social media is that the European Union is not an alliance of peoples, but an alliance that is based on economic treaties and on foreign banks, which produces even greater austerity and deprives the middle class of money. So that's what I wanted to know. Why? What do you think about that? And then a specific question for President Rossi. I hear that from like in my home and from all my friends, the healthcare system in Tuscany is going towards a progressive privatization, and I sometimes hear that in my home. And then maybe for black people, for migrants, these visits and exams are for free while we have to pay for them. And that's a sign of civilization, if you want. So avoid excessive costs that can produce discrimination against those who are exempted from payments. Thank you. Thanks for the translators who had to translate that.
Interamente.
So the healthcare system in Tuscany is public, and there's a ticket, so a fee that we didn't put into force, and was put into force way before us. So for some exams, this ticket, this fee, so it's laboratory tests, nothing really costly. These makes it competitive to turn to the private healthcare agencies. But interventions and surgeries, definitely the least important ones, as well as the most important ones, are being carried out in the public health system. So the idea that Tuscany health system is privatizing is wrong, and I would like even to discuss it with your parents if they want. That's not like that. There's a problem with financing, yes. We've heard a lot about that, and we have to say the truth. In Tuscany, 95% of funds are public. There's a problem with financing that maybe the vice president knows well. So for years, we have now been under the threshold of 6.5% of the GDP. And under all experts in this matter, all experts say that under this threshold of 6.5%, the healthcare system has troubles. So these problems exist both in Tuscany and in the whole country. So I would have to make a wider discussion here. And I think we need better investment in healthcare system, in education and universities, and in the territory management. But I can assure you that the healthcare system in Tuscany is public. As far as the taking care of everyone is concerned, I say yes, we need to take care and treat everyone. Article 32 of our Constitution speaks volumes about that. It clearly states that health is a right, is an individual right and a collective interest, because our fathers who fought during the World War II, they decided to write that in the eyes of a collective interest, because everyone needs to be safe and healthy in our territory. We had an initiative for vaccines and vaccinations because everyone should be vaccinated, and obviously if I don't go there, it's obvious that I lose a battle. If I don't treat someone and I don't then that person who is not treated by me, then they could spread sickness, the illnesses that they bring. So it, as well as an ethical principle, it is also in the collective interest of the whole population. So we are also Catholics, so the Good Samaritan parable should also be taught and reconsider. So how can I allow that as a Good Samaritan? I see a person that is wounded, that was beaten up, and the Good Samaritan takes that person there, takes this person to a hotel, to a shelter, and leaves the money there so that they treat him. And then he said, if you spend more, then I will stop by again and I will give you what you need. That's a civilization and Catholic and religious parable, a teaching. Before anything else, someone says that Europe needs to be based on these values as well. And I say, yes, that is true. In Tuscany, we put into force a law that says that court is right. We want to treat everyone who is in our territory, and to make sure that everyone who is in our territory, that they have basic treatment. I think that's the right way to look at the future and to be all healthy, because as it was said before, it is true that at least in the eyes of illness and sicknesses, we should all be equal. Who is wealthy and who is not, who is poor, who comes from far away and who was born there. That's a great win for us, and we won't stack back on this in Tuscany, and I will fight till the very end.
Bardzo proszę, następne pytanie.
Could we have the next question, please?
Hi, Vice President. You said that most of the people get along with nationalist ideas. We were not taught what Europe is. Freedom is like the air. You understand the importance of freedoms when you lack of freedom. We take for granted how Europe is irrelevant. There are many people saying that Europe is obsolete and is old and fashioned. Those, yeah, well, I will try to make it shorter. Domenica. So otherwise she got angry. Where are you from? From Tuscany. From where? From Pistoia, from the province of Pistoia. Okay. Okay, I lost the thread, sorry. The question is the following. How can we disseminate the idea that Europe is not something obsolete? Europe is not a dream. This is, I read the manifesto of Ventotene. Europe is not a dream. We are not dreamers. What the European Commission can do, not the Europe of the single currency or the Europe that takes care on Italian accounts, but Europe who takes care of people coming to the Mediterranean Sea. What is Europe? What is Europe? This is the institution in Brussels, the Commission? No. We are a small tool of Europe. Europe is you. Europe is you in the towns and villages in Europe, in Italy, in Poland, Holland. This is where Europe is. The only question is the following. So let people say that Europe is something obsolete, or we try to raise our voice. Those who attack Europe on an everyday basis are really aggressive. most of the citizens, or most of the European citizens, are silent, don't want to take the floor, don't want to discuss with people. And this dialogue, this is not a dialogue, this is sometimes a kind of violence, aggression, hated speech. There is a lot of violence, aggression from the part of the Italian government as well. And this is because some people are not heard. We don't need to hate other people. So let's try to build up a better Europe. We are the shapers of Europe. Probably won't be the same Europe of yesterday or today, but if we started today, the Europe will be better tomorrow and the day after. We will share solidarity. Do not leave migrants dying in the Mediterranean Sea. This is what we need to do all together. And we stand aside people who want to do that. But we are just a small tool of yourself.
Last question.
Yes, please, the last question.
Okay, hello. My name is Alexandra Wiciak. And I would like to ask you a question about Brexit, because social democratic values are very close to my heart, and I felt very grateful for the opportunity to study abroad. But with the light of recent events connecting to Brexit, I am pretty worried what my future will be, because I ideally would want to study in England or Scotland, and live there in the future, hopefully. So my question is where the line stands between European Union and Europe. What are the perspectives of students? Because when I read articles about Brexit, there's really no mentioning students. And as a person that applies in September to universities abroad, I'm worried and very uncertain about my future. Thank you.
Just a few thoughts. I had the great advantage of living in many parts of Europe during my life. My father was a soldier first, and then he worked for the Foreign Service, and so we traveled a lot. And then I studied abroad, and then I became a diplomat myself. You know what the biggest gift is if you spend time in another country? And I don't mean holiday for a week or 2 weeks, but serious time. You discover who you are. It is in rubbing up to people who are different that you identify your own identity, that you understand who you are. Living in another country made me more Dutch than I was before going there. But at the same time, it also brought a deep love to me of other countries. I lived in Italy for 4 years as a teenager. I've been Romano and Romanista for the rest of my life. This is something that was given to me. Yeah. Yes. And even though we are weaker than before, we'll still beat the hell out of Fiorentina. Anyway. But returning to the point you were making, if you have the capacity, and all of you here have the capacity, it is almost a duty to spend time as a student in another country to become better citizens of your own country and to also start to understand what it means to be European. The United Kingdom, whether some of them like it or not, will remain a deeply European country. And I mean this in a cultural sense, in a geopolitical sense, in an economic sense. Yes, Brexit will do harm, and perhaps if they are not very careful, great harm. But it will not, the geography will not change, the interest will not change. And also, British academia has been a huge, huge contribution to all of Europe and all of the world. You know, I think I can say this in this university. We do admire the universities in the United Kingdom and what they have done for the whole of Europe. And I really hope we can find ways of keeping them very close to us and having a lot of students there. But it might become more expensive if they have different fees. I don't know. I can't predict that. But as someone I was raised in an English educational system, I lived in Italy, I've learned to love those countries almost as much as my own country. In the course of my work, I've learned to love other countries. And that is what, for me, is being European. In the love of other countries, you discover the beauty of your own culture and your own country. That is such a richness. I can't tell you how enriching that experience is. And somebody talked about air and that you're not aware of the air. I always say it's like a fish in the water. If you ask a fish in the water, define water, the fish will not be able to do that. If you take the fish out of the water just 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds, the fish will know exactly what water is and want to go back into it. That is the same with culture. And if I can end on this, because I understand this was the last question, I want to really, really leave you with a heartfelt message. Stay true to your beliefs. I'm not saying it should be the same beliefs as mine. Don't get me wrong. Stay true to your beliefs. Stay true to your individuality and your personal rights. Stay true to this incredible richness of the European culture. I would not be standing here, probably, you never know, if my father as a young boy was not liberated by Polish soldiers in the Netherlands. Stay true to our history. Understand where we came from. Understand the sacrifices British, Polish and other soldiers did to make us free. See this freedom not as something that is God-given. It's hard work day to day. See this freedom as a huge legacy that is given to you by your parents and your teachers, and a huge responsibility upon your shoulders to make sure that this freedom is strengthened and maintained. This is my appeal to you. Make Europe better for us. You can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was the answer to the last question. I know there have been many other questions, but I hope that our guests will visit us again in Poland and there will be an opportunity to ask these questions again. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and to you, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for participating in this citizens' dialogue.
Grazie.
Thank you very much.
Grazie a te. Penso che prima tocca a lei.